In the last video on my space golf game Celestial Golf, I went over importing the terrain data from NASA orbiters into Blender and rendering a 2D image that we can then bring into Godot and have this nice dynamic lighting model where we can move the sun around and have the craters and mountains on the planet reflect the correct lighting in real time, which looks really cool from a distance out here. But it breaks down when we zoom all the way up, because as you can see, the terrain is not super detailed. We're rendering this image at 2048 square pixels. And we just don't have the disk space or the memory to render the entire planet at the resolution that we need. So in this video, I'm going to go into how we create the detailed terrain segments. So I'm just going to go back to my Blender file that I was working on last time. When I'm setting this up properly, I create multiple scenes here so that I have, so that I can go back and render them. But just for this quick tour, I'm just going to edit this file. We'll go in, turn on the shading so we can see the shape of the terrain here. And the details, what we're going to do is we're going to render a whole lot of tiny segments around, all the way around the surface of the planet. So we're going to have high detail images at the surface, but we're not going to render the whole body of the planet. These segments are going to be 2048 by 1024, so they're going to be wider than they are tall. And we just need to move our camera up a little bit. So let's select the camera and we're going to do G, Y. So we're just going to move the camera up so it's focused on just the top, just the top part of the planet there, and shrink the camera down so they can only see just a small amount of the surface. Now I'm just kind of guessing this. I've done all the calculations properly, but for now I'm just kind of like lining it up by eye to see how it is. And then what we need to do is make sure that the top of the camera doesn't clip into any mountains. So let's select the planet now. I'll rename that to Mars while we're here. And we're going to rotate it about the z-axis. So this is going to give us all of the detail, all of the surface of the planet. And you can see here is the tallest mountains on Mars. Oh, we got that really well. So you can see that those three tallest mountains there, the fastest mountains, are just grazing the top section of the camera. So that's perfect. The camera is set up perfectly for that. If the camera was any higher, then we'd be wasting all of the space. We'd be missing out on rendering this stuff and just rendering nothing. And if the camera was any lower, then we would be clipping the mountains. So that's perfect. We'll set Mars back to its default rotation. And now we're going to render all those detailed segments. To do that, we're going to use the animation. Essentially what we're going to do is just animate Mars rotating around 360 degrees. So we're going to do it over 30 frames, which means we're going to create 30 detail segments. So let's start. I like to change and start at frame 0. So we're going to start with 0 and end with 29. So we have 29 frames. And we're going to set the rotation. We're going to rotate it about the z-axis, which causes the planet to spin like this. So if we set the rotation to 0, and then we click this little dot here to animate it, that means that on our timeline, we have the rotation set to 0 here. And if we then move the timeline all the way up to frame 30, not frame 29, but frame 30, so one frame after the end of the animation, we'll set Z to 360. And we'll click that to set a keyframe. And now you can see the animation shows the planet rotating. And the reason why I set the keyframe after the end of the animation is because if we set the keyframe on frame 29, then frame 0 and frame 29 would be the same. And we want them to be, we want frame 29 to be the frame just before it gets back to the start. Okay, so we can play the animation and there it goes. But you can see there's this easing. It sort of starts slow, gets faster, and slows down again, which is great if you're animating, you know, an arm or something. But we actually want this animation to be really smooth. So we're going to fix that by going into the graph editor. You can see that nice smooth curve here. And we're just going to change that from a Bezier curve set them both to linear. There we go. And now we have, it's just continuously spinning. So that's perfect. We want to have a little bit of overlap, but not too much between the edges of the two frames. So you can see here, this middle mountain is being rendered on the right-hand side of this image. And in the next frame, that same mountain is sort of half off the edge. So we do have full coverage of that mountain. It's going to be included in both of those images. We could actually zoom in a little bit. We want to capture as much detail as possible. So let's just select the camera again. We could zoom in a little bit more, just a little bit, and move it up a little bit as well to there. And now let's look at those two frames again. So we've got like 3/4 of the mountain on screen here. And if we go to the next frame over here, we've got about 3/4 of the mountain off screen. So that's a little bit too risky. We're going to miss out on some detail. So let's zoom the camera out a little bit more. And now it looks like between those two frames, we've certainly got enough overlap of that mountain. So I'm happy to go ahead and render this. Okay, and now we're just simply going to render animation. Okay, so that took about 10 minutes on my GPU, about 20 seconds a frame, so not too bad, but the rendering is done now, so let's open it up and have a look. So here are all of the images. So you can see all the surface images, and these are all 2048 wide, so they're not super high resolution. Like, you can still zoom up in the game and sort of it starts to get a bit blurry, but I don't want to go any more than that because we're starting to, like, how big is this folder? It's 148 megabytes. So you multiply that by about 10 or so bodies and the game's starting to get reasonably big, like the actual download for the game. And also the load times, forgot about that. So I think this is about as detailed as I want the terrain to be. It's a good compromise between load times and storage and also the detail of the terrain. So you can see here are the 29 frames, there's beautiful mountains, and then if we switch over to look at the normals, you can see here are the normal maps for each of those detailed terrain segments. They look absolutely beautiful. Obviously they have this weird green color, but it's interesting to note that unlike our full planet normal map, which is green, red and blue sort of in equal proportions, all of the detailed normal maps are green. And that's because they were all rendered on just that top part of the planet. And that's actually what we want, because Godot, when we bring them into Godot and we rotate them into the right place, Godot will automatically figure out, correct for that angle. So let's bring it into the game. Where we left off last time was we had this really low detail version of the planet here. We'll keep that here. And I've actually created a scene called Terrain Circle. It's a tool that I can import all these things in all at once. And there we have them. They've all been imported all at once, and they're way too big. So we need to change the segment scale down and the radius of the planet up. It's really fun to play with until we get it just right. So the radius is kind of like pushing the segments apart, and the scale is making them smaller. So what we're trying to do is aim to get this to exactly line up with the base render. And you can see just about there. It's actually useful to use the edge right here to get these to just overlap perfectly. There we go. Okay, and that'll just about do it. Like, in the proper game, I'm going to get this exactly right, but just so that you can see, there it just kind of looks like Mars, right? So if I zoom all the way up, you can see we have this really nice big detail, and if I hide the terrain circle, that's the low resolution version. So we've basically enhanced the resolution by quite a lot, by a factor of, I think, about 5 of the all of the surface level details, and then the center of the planet is still like really low detail, and that's fine because you're never going to zoom up that close. Okay, so there we have our planet, and the normal maps have been automatically taken into account, so we still have the sunlight still properly bounces off those surface details like that. And we're nearly done, but we do need to have the collisions so that the ball can actually bounce around on the terrain. And I have got that taken care of by this class. So very quickly to explain how this works, I have generated an empty file called tshape file for every one of these detail segments you can see over here. These files literally are empty, but if you open them, they generate this at import time. Let's have a look at the one for those big mountains. So the Mars 11 tshape. This is the one for the mountains. It's going to look at the PNG image and just goes through and generates a whole bunch of convex hulls, basically polygons that you can see the hills. It generates a whole bunch of points on the polygon, but whenever there's a little dip, it starts a new polygon, and then it just puts them all together in this scene. And this is all taken care of automatically. I didn't have to handcraft any of these terrain shapes, and that allows the ball to bounce onto the surface. And here's what it looks like in the game. All right, so we can actually bounce the ball around. Yeah, don't worry about that flicker, but you can see the collision detail on the surface is just on the surface. There's no collisions. We don't have the planet's surface filled in all the way, but if we move ourselves over to these mountains, you can see that the ball is able to properly roll down the mountains, and speed's a bit too fast. But we have proper collision detection for the terrain. It's no longer just a circle. And the last thing that we need for some of these bodies is an atmosphere, so it feels like it's daytime. I've basically got a square here, a polygon square, with a special shader in it. Essentially, I'm just getting the angle of the light, and when the light hits, it is coming in at a certain angle, it lights up, and when it's on the backside, it fades away, and it also fades off as we get further away from the planet. And for example, we can change this to change sort of how quickly the atmosphere falls off. I'll zoom up a little bit. I'll also hide the terrain circle so we can see it a bit better. You can see that I've got a few parameters that we can do, and we can also set the sky color, basically pick whatever color of sky we want to have for our planet. And there we have our atmosphere. So there you have my hasty recreation of Mars in Celestial Gulf with the eerie green atmosphere. In the full game, I've done a much more careful job of putting this all together. But that's kind of a quick recreation of just one planet from the game.
Hi, it's me from the future. I actually recorded that whole video a couple of months ago, but I'm just getting around to editing it now. In the meantime, the game is now available for you to playtest. So if you are interested in this game, it does include a whole lot more than just the surface of a planet. Obviously, this is a game about exploring the entire solar system with realistic orbital mechanics. If that is something that interests you, head over to Steam and you can try the playtest right now. Or you can just click the wishlist button if you want to wait for the game to get further along in development. I'm still working on the game. I'm publishing videos semi-regularly to this channel, so please help the new channel out. Subscribe if you want to see more of this content, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.